Hi, this is Miss Eglin with Art Appreciation, and today's video is on the art of ancient Mesopotamia. And let's see here. Here's some maps of the region we're talking about, and this is also known as the Fertile Crescent. Okay, but we have the two rivers, the Tigris River and the Euphrates, and this is in modern day Iraq and also parts of Syria. Okay, we have Sumner here, the Sumerians, the Assyrians were here, and this is showing us where some of the famous, relics were from that time. Okay, of Egypt over here, the Mediterranean, the Caspian Sea, and this is from 3500 BCE. Okay, and there's a lot of changes in this region. Okay, and here's just another map. Okay, and this is really, like we said, more of the culture of the region than of a specific people. We're not just talking about Assyrian art or Sumerian art. We're really talking about the whole region, okay, in the ancient times. And people lived in city states at this time. There might have been an urban center, that was surrounded by farmland with smaller settlements in them. Okay, now first we are going to focus on the Sumerians. And this is from 3500 BCE to 3000 BCE. Okay, and it was an empire. We have a lot going on here. It's modern day Turkey, um, the Mediterranean Sea, and here, of course, is Egypt. There's the Nile. Okay, and let's just make this a little bit smaller. The Sumerians controlled the floodwaters of the Euphrates with canals and developed irrigation for crops. Okay, and that was the first time that was done. And also, the Sumerians are known for developing language, cuneiform, which was written on clay tablets with a stylus. Okay, and this is an example of cuneiform, and it's kind of triangular. There's a lot of symbols here, okay, that would be read, and scholars and archaeologists have found these tablets today. Okay, and here's just the example from the book that was found in Iraq, and you can see this tablet's a little more organized. But if you look at these symbols, do you see anything that you might know what it is? It looks like kind of like stars here, water. It looks like this is some type of animal, like a bird maybe. Okay, but each symbol represented, a letter or sound from their alphabet. Okay, Mesopotamian architecture. They have many ziggurats that have been found, or the ruins have been found. But all a ziggurat is, it's a like a stepped mountain made out of brick-covered earth. Okay, and it was built, and it really showed the importance of their worship. And they had a polytheistic religion, which means many gods. So there'd be a god of god of war, a god of a sun god, and all these things that represented different elements of their life. But again, at this time, there's a lot of political arrest. After the Sumerians, there's the Akkad, Lagash, Babylonians, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Neo-Babylonians, and then the Persians. Um, in Persia would be today modern day Iran. Okay, and this is a ziggurat, the ziggurat of Ur. but you can see they go up. There's steps going up into them. There's different levels, and at the highest level, there would have been some type of temple to the gods and goddesses. Okay, and this is the Ishtar Gate, very famous um, representative of Babylonian art. And this would have been the ceremonial entrance into the city, and they call it Neo Babylon. Okay, and you want to try to take, and if you look, I mean, this is an entranceway for people, it is actually huge. Okay, it's really large. This enamel glaze is blue, and then you have these creatures. Okay, and what they are actually, we will find out. It says here they're decorated with dragons, sacred to the city's patron god Marduk, and bulls with blue horns that represented other gods. Okay, so these were clay bricks, covered with this blue glaze. And this was built around 575 BCE, and it stood, as a symbol of the power of Neo Babylon. And in the book it says, imagine if you were a goat farmer and you came to the city and, you're down here, you're just very small, down here looking up at this. What are you going to, think of? You'll probably be like, wow, pretty impressed. Okay. And even today, they're still impressive. Okay. And the images of people. One thing that's interesting about this art period is the figures were depicted in a lifelike and realistic way. There's a lot of details on the dress, and this is a ruler named Gudea, okay, of Lagash. And they have, I think, about, 20 to maybe 25, 30 statues of him that he put in each temple, he either restored or built. And if you look at this enlarged, you're going to see there's cuneiform on the front of his garment here, explaining who he is and what he's doing. And also, look at his eyes, they're wide open. And, in the book, they say, what do you think he's looking at? Is he looking at his people? What is he looking at, in your opinion? Okay. The standard of this was a box that was actually found destroyed in a royal grave site. Over many, many years, it was reconstructed, and there's different scenes on it. So, right here we have a chariot, horses. This figure here is larger, which would depict he is extremely important, probably the king. Okay, and just by the stance, they look like soldiers, chariots. And there's also a side of the standard that depicts peace. But this this image, these are actually made by mosaics of shell, red limestone, and lapis, a blue stone that was, put together to make these images. Next, we have the stele of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was the ruler of Sumner, about 4,000 years ago. He made Babylon his capital. What he is really known for are, of course, Hammurabi's laws. This was the first time in history that somebody coded the laws. If you kill somebody, this will happen. One of his famous sayings is, um, an eye for an eye. That was, if you took somebody's eye out, they would take yours out, which to us sounds very harsh. But again, if you took somebody's eye out, they weren't going to kill you. It was kind of an equality. And this is a 7-foot megalith, a huge stone made of black basalt. And this is actually at the Louvre in Paris. I saw it. They have a pretty nice, exhibit of ancient art, and it's pretty big. And actually, right here, I know it's kind of hard to see here, but this is cuneiform. Okay, and you can see it. I think if we zoom in a little closer, but these would be the actual laws. And right here, it's showing Hammurabi, receiving these laws from Shamash, their sun god and the god of justice. So it's like, they're showing him being given these laws. And then this code of laws, many other codes of laws were actually based on this. Okay, so that's just to wrap up the art of Mesopotamia. And here's the questions for understanding. How did cuneiform writing begin? What's a ziggurat? What was its purpose? And why was Hammurabi, the stele of Hammurabi, so important? Okay. And there's a lot of other images in Mesopotamian art, gods, goddesses, different figures, again, pretty accurately depicted. Okay, thanks for listening.